could we all come to stage and maybe for the final plenum, it's starting to rain, which is good synchronization. Maybe we just switch the mics in between. I think we both have one, so maybe we keep the microphone in between. We had quite an interesting discussion right now. My question would be, we see so much on the mobility, which was a pre-selection obviously, and but everybody starts and builds their own platform. What is the value of doing something together? I mean, I see a mobility platform, and is that just at the beginning, even if we think in DLT, but everybody wants still to do it on its own? Who would like to point it out?
Maybe I start because we as a company are a strong believer also what we call cross-domain ecosystems. So we think in the future we have to build bridges between ecosystems. So currently we have ecosystems in automotive, in industry, in residential. And in the future customers expect seamless experience. So which will go from your house over mobility to your working place. And we need to prepare for that. And the kind of technologies which we discussed today are, in our understanding, let's say, have the promise to solve this solution. So to build up a foundation layer, digital ledger technologies, which eases those cross-domain use cases to build on top of this foundation layer. So we are a strong believer in this one. I think it's really needed to bring the various players together, also to align with the government, political initiatives there, and I really support his position, especially if it comes to Gaia X and digital sovereignty. And I think this holds for all the industries we are in, and so I'm a clear supporter of this idea.
So let me answer. Let me answer the specific question: mobility blockchain platform, blockchain mobility platform, and whatever the other platform is called. Well, I'll phrase it positively. That means obviously the time is ripe for such a thing. And the reason why we see many, at least for us, I believe the simple answer is Fakten schaffen. So if you just sit there and say, well, if anybody else is doing it, let me not do it. So Fakten schaffen, somebody needs to start, several will start, and the nature of the market, the nature of the ecosystem will somehow hopefully create the necessary convergence and scalability or merging for the platforms. But let's be sure about one thing. Any platform in the sense of that it's a market-serving platform will in the end need to be market coverage. So that's no way around it.
Yeah, but maybe to challenge that again, I see Libra and I see also Chinese initiatives, and I see like thousands of initiatives in a small use case. Small, I mean, it's a large use case, but still to challenge, I agree, and totally it's better to run 3 steps forward instead of analyzing and doing nothing. But how is it about alliance strategies and joint forces?
I think, so my opinion, one thing is the approach me first, and also the comment, everything has to be linked in the end. It's a very good thing. And I also think today, when looking at discussions in my company, why should we go for talking to the public transportation networks and so on, is that we are also in a position where I have to convince my own management that what we are planning to do is working. So instead of just going out and say, we reinvent the world, I have to show them with a specific case and, of course, this big vision of a big platform. Hey, this is a step we should go. And when we prove the first step, in this case is revenue splitting, then the next step will be orientating. So what other initiatives are there, how to combine it. But to get the freedom to do so out of my company, I have to prove my company that the direction we are going with the vision, there is the correct vision. I think that's also something which should be considered, that the visions are all big, but I think everyone and every company has to prove their own company that this vision is a thing you should approach and go to.
I totally understand it from a corporate logic. Now, but let's challenge again. In Switzerland, the SBB is actually trying to, SBB tries to be the mobility provider. And they started also with e-bike together, with the BMW together, and trying to get an ecosystem where you say, I am coming from home to my target location, and that's whoever brings me. I would like to provide the platform. In Switzerland, there's also a strong SBB dominance that is a bit maybe different to Germany, but this would, for me, that would be like a call for collaboration, and yeah, maybe we could comment on that.
Yeah, quickly, I think, if SBB has got the market power for Switzerland to have a centralized platform, they should do so. From a pure economic rationale, I would advise them to build the centralized platform. I think what proved to be very successful, I think, over the last years is now an approach which I think we are getting more and more into, which is on a horizontal technology layer. The community as it is here, we need to cooperate. And there are certain homeworks we need to do. Identity probably is one of the most important things to do. Settlement, payment, etc. There's some other kind of horizontal technology stuff where we need to cooperate as a DLT community. And then we have very sharp use cases where we need to cooperate, but with different people. So 90% of my time I work with e-mobility guys now, and kind of 2 years ago I only worked with DLT guys. And I think this combination we need to get towards to. So I think it doesn't help if we create the German blockchain or the mobility blockchain or whatsoever. But I think this combination of horizontal cooperation there with very dedicated topics, like, for example, identity on the one hand, and very sharp verticals on the other, in order to prove real-life value to the business. I think that's how it will work out, and I think that's also a mode we are all getting into, which I find quite promising.
Yes.
So maybe from the industry side, I think I'm the only not mobility provider here on stage, but I'd like to pick up the topic because it's quite interesting, and the question you raised in the beginning also, where's the value created? And I also would like to pick up the picture that you brought up regarding connecting or building streets, basically. Because the picture I see from a broader market perspective, I don't care what market we are addressing, but if I look at it from an infrastructure perspective, I see islands growing. And islands might be bigger or smaller, but they are all islands. So how do I make an economy out of it? I have to build streets between islands that they can trade with each other. Right now they can't, even on a technological basis. So an approach that we are now trying to build also from a Deutsche Börse perspective, as a market infrastructure provider, we want to build infrastructure that enables a market, because currently we don't have a market. We have single shops with different people in a single shop, and everyone is trying to build the biggest single shop. That's not how an economy works. Yeah?
Absolutely.
And if you have 3, for example, trade finance platforms, which engage with each other, then this can only be possible if I have a technical on and offboarding of assets from these platforms, and therefore I need a technical infrastructure. And that is, out of our perspective, something where we can provide actually a service, and then it doesn't really matter if it's a mobility use case, or if it's a finance use case, or if it's a football player use case where you can get some money to raise to get a player, yeah? Doesn't matter, because after all you need simply an infrastructure to book through assets.
So your strategy would be first build the horizontal, then the vertical.
No, the strategy is basically we need to do both in parallel. I know this is ambitious as always, yeah. But the thing is, the infrastructure is the long shot. It's in Germany we would say ein dickes Brett, yeah. So it's hard to dig through, yeah. But after all, you still have to engage in use cases. Simply at first to understand how it works, how the industry is moving on. Because after all, then you build something that is not practically available after 8 years. If you build an infrastructure 8 years and it doesn't work in practice, that's not.
So I would say we're talking about consortia here mainly. I'll focus on the platform part. So that part of the whole system, which is not in itself offering a service. That's roughly how you define a platform. And I would, and this is a panel, so we should have some discussions here. So I'd like to contradict my previous speaker here in the sense, what is needed here is not the infrastructure, in my opinion. So don't focus on the software, focus on the protocols. Meaning to say, Ethereum, for instance, is a Solidity stack. Focus on the consensus, focus on a way how to make inter-island protocol, you define the protocols. When you look at the internet, it was about the TCP/IP, the UDP/IP, the IP, the PPP, the ICMP, etc. The protocols defined what was then built, and the beautiful internet we've all been using for the last 20 years, it's not a Cisco or Huawei or whatever system or Thricom. It is a system which is purely defined by the protocols. And I believe we should not forget that, at least when we build the platforms, in the sense we're not in the vehicle offering part of it, but we're in the Koppelfeld, as you say in German industry. And if you look at the protocols, it doesn't matter who in the end wins, because the infrastructure is replaceable, the protocols stay. All of the routers that were in place 15 years ago, I'm almost sure, have been thrown away and been replaced. So the infrastructure is transient. What stays is the protocol. And I believe that's the approach we should take advantage of now that we live in the age of software.
Mm-hmm. Agree, actually. So on a small point, we don't need software as an infrastructure, but we need infrastructure. So I'm pretty fine with having protocols, but we don't have them right now.
Mm-hmm. So I would like to add on that, because I find this a very interesting discussion, and what is actually missing from my perspective is, let's say, the perspectives on the industries itself. And especially, so you mentioned some of the industries where we really lost track. So the IT infrastructure is one of the industries in Germany or even Europe. We lost track. We had a leading position a long time ago, but we lost track. And we have certain industries where we are really leading on a worldwide scale. So for example, the mobility domain or the industry domain. And from a strategical perspective, for me it's now really crucial to understand what are the mechanisms and what are the platform mechanisms playing in those industries, and later on also to connect the industries. And here I see clearly a need for some kind of foundational platform, which is not a hyperscaler. So I'm with your statement earlier. It will not help if we build up as Gaia X as yet another hyperscaler. We need a new mechanism, and distributed ledgers would be one. And this, for me, is an absolutely key element in order to support the leading nature of our industries. Because if we look also in the automotive industry, some new players are coming up. So, for example, in the field of autonomous driving, who have not only the mobility part in, but also the platform part. And for me, it is really crucial that we find the right answer to this one. And therefore, I think we have a big task in order to provide, from a European perspective, some kind of infrastructure layer which enables us to protect and extend our leading position in the industries we have. I see a strategic risk here that we lose this position.
But what would you expect, maybe just a short question, what would you expect actually from policy? If I think, I remember last year with the Consortia, also part of the members here have been, we have been in Tel Aviv with the Mobility Summit, and Mr. Netanyahu talked and he said, well, I want that Israel is really leading. It's like in crypto technology, we also would like to do the smart mobility. The fuel initiative was the background. What would you expect also from policy?
I think from policy perspective, I think politicians in Germany, in Europe, really have understood the strategic challenge which is on the table. And therefore, I fully buy in the idea of Gaia X as a conceptual idea. In order, what do we have to protect, and what would be our target position? There are quite some intense discussions on what is the right way in order to achieve this. But from a ambition point of view, I think the ambition is clear, politicians on German level and also European level clearly understood that we need an answer to this dominating platform effects. And the important part now is, do we agree on the right path to this position? And what is the elements coming out of distributed ledgers or other decentralized technologies in this path? This is an open discussion, but I think we are now at the right point in time to have this discussion and to join forces, because here I'm a little bit, let's say, on a different side than some of the colleagues here. I think the proof of concept phases and minimum viable products, this is done now. Everybody understands technology is there. And now the next step is to bring this on a real, let's say, strategic level on German or European level. And there we talk about real money and big investments which have been put on the table. And this has to be done. We cannot wait another 10 or 20 years for another proof of concept.
Mario Brandmogen, maybe what would be the answer, the political answer?
First, to add on what you said, and basically this was as well the answer to your first question, why build all these platforms again and again? Because I always use the picture of a Lego. We are building the blocks. If we've learned one thing within the last 10 years is that we just don't know. Nobody expected what basically was coming. And you said the word convergence. So basically all the innovation is basically at the edge of the industries we know. So it's only by putting industries and ideas together. So Daimler built beautiful cars, but then somebody started to play the mobility game. And it took a while to react on that because somebody was just changing the game and we were not realizing it. And so this is basically, we have to build these Lego blocks just for being able to play whatever game comes up on the horizon. And so this was the POC time. We all built these blocks. And if you look at Amazon's R&D budget, the biggest part goes into biotech. So why? So it's Amazon. Who knows? But maybe it makes sense. So if they can, whatever, you have a Prime Abo, they whatever, get some solution to cancer. Who knows? And this is what we have to learn. We were so classically in our silos, and our KPIs were to be precise, to be good, to be solid, to be rigid. And somebody just changed the game. It's about creativity, it's about being horizontal, and therefore I absolutely support to do things just for the sake of having it done. And then when we have to build up that big stack, it's good that there were maybe like 10 platforms, everybody learned something, and in the end, we've got the ideal way to put it together.
How strong?
Perhaps one quick thing to add, or also a question, because I think what we realized, what I said earlier, like in the past we had a lot of these DLT conferences. We talked always to the head of innovation. We did some pilots, and kind of from beginning of this year, we like 90% of our time we work with the operational e-mobility business. But we see that this big challenge now is crossing the chasm. So crossing the chasm between R&D and innovation to the real life operational business where the impact is made. And that's a huge challenge for all of these organizations. And then obviously, as we talk a lot about cross-organizational work, then to align that. And I think there my question goes to you. How do you see, what's the recipe to overcome, to cross this chasm, you would say, within Bosch?
So I think this is what we actually do is go in corporations also with other companies. So we saw the use case out there. We have in Stuttgart a pilot plant, Arena 2036, where we, together with partners, work on those examples. But this goes more in the direction of proof of concept. So, and I think this we can check mark. There are enough proof of concepts there. Technology is there. And the next step then is to think about how can we scale this. And there my point is we need also a top-down approach where companies join forces in consortia and really think in this direction of digital sovereignty, Gaia X, and go for it. Yeah? And this impulse currently, I think, is taking up. We have a strong discussion about Gaia X, many companies supporting this idea, and I think this is a good starting point, and this is definitely needed top-down in order to extend the bottom-up proof of concept ideas.
How can we actually forget about the dream of I have my central platform, because that is, and I think every project manager of an initiative actually has to believe that I built the platform for which scale up. But overall, if I look actually a little bit from outside and I see that each company is trying to build up the platform, and that's why our platforms stay too small. How can we overcome that? And how can we actually join forces? That would, for me, the critical part. Is there anybody an opinion on that?
So I would pitch again for the infrastructure. Sorry, to raise that point. Because the thing is, actually, I think it doesn't matter after all, like who's building up the platform in a decentralized world. The business of a central platform owner who gets the margin doesn't work anymore. And this also is in regard not even to old business models, also as Deutsche Börse has some to extent, yeah, but also to new business models, Airbnb, Uber, Spotify, where a central provider like gets high margins from simply like getting people together. So as the platform provision itself will be commodity business, yeah. First, I think good point is for German market and also our high efficient industries that asset owners and asset producers get more share of the cake. That's an advantage for German industry because the margin in between is getting cut out. But second, this only works if you have protocol, software, whatever, a basic infrastructure that enables them to interact. And if that doesn't work, then the island will not provide any additional value because it is simply an island where everybody is doing their services for their own, and we can live like from getting haircuts from each other. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in my opinion, there are two sides. The one side is the technical part where we discuss about standards, protocols, infrastructure, software, whatever. And if you ask like a blockchain enthusiasm here, do we want to work with another company? The answer would be definitely yes, I want to do this. Mm. And then it comes to this transition to the operating business, to the normal business who don't have to do anything with IT, but just their current business problems. And they're like you said, trimmed on this. The best thing I can do is going to Silicon Valley, learn from the biggest player, build up my platform, everything is fine, this is how business is done. This is the philosophy, I think, when talking to most of customers, managers, whatever, the idea of having this centralized platform is the only thing to make big money, and that's what I focus on. And I think this is the other side. It's education, to really show not only that there's a small POC, we worked on it, but to really show and teach the managers how important it is to overthink this old model of having centralized platform and only this one could be leading to success, but only to show them how they can also benefit from centralized platform, from co-opetition, which is still a thing which in most management heads are like working together with my competitor, never ever. Mm. And this is thing they have to overcome. And in my case, it's education to show them as a blockchain enthusiast or whatever, how they really can benefit if they open their mind even for decentralized things. Mm.
So if you look at the successful platforms of which we're all aware and to some extent afraid, most of them manage the aggregation on the demand side. So they aggregated the users, which is the inflow of money, and they leveraged that to be able to extract huge 20-30% of revenue. Now, if you look at another way of doing it, so take an example, I like the example of a port. So if you want to become a maritime nation and a huge successful country like Singapore, what do? Well, you're not going to fund your logistics companies, and you're not going to give money to whoever is in the trucking business, but you are going to make sure that you have a very efficient port. You also make sure that you have very efficient roads in there. You're then going to make your island intelligent, again to the protocols, and you're going to provide this in a way that anybody who's in the business of doing business figures out their own way of funding, figures out their way that makes them competitive, finds a successful way, and is then willing to some extent, yes, through my taxes, I am paying part of the port anyway. Then, for instance, I'm sharing a warehouse with somebody who's completely my competitor. But anyway, I'm too small to afford a warehouse, so let's get together, 3 or 4 of us, build up a warehouse. That doesn't mean that I want the same funding that you do, and I will try my best to catch your clients if I can, but in terms of warehouse, let's just pool. And then you have other things where we kind of cooperate on a more half-casual, half-formal way, and the main point here is provide the basic mechanisms. The German word used to be ordoliberal. Provide the rules, provide the mechanisms, regulate those, have the policies in there, and then let everybody compete on it. And this is, I believe, we are far too early in the DLT area and in the IoT area to conclusively know what the business impact will be. It was just mentioned earlier, 2000 was the .com, 2010 at the earliest we started seeing some real money. We're at the very early stage. So let's not start throwing big money in any way at things that right now, I believe none of us fully knows where it will flow to. Reality is too dynamic. But let's build good ports, let's build good infrastructure, which in software means protocol, standards, etc., and then let the market and the dynamics of human innovation decide which way it'll go, is the way I would see it at this point in time. And things change over time.
But it's a call for action. So it's a call, you would say, we need to invest. I saw a little bit of a contradiction. Either on the one hand, you say, don't throw too much money into it because we don't know where's the answer. On the other hand, you said we need to build the port, and the port won't be for free. So it's a call to collaborate in the pre-competitive stage. Is that correct for the protocols?
I believe, yes, at this point in time, there are areas where everybody in the industry of whatever your industry is, we are in the industry of finance and mobility. To some extent, I believe most of us in the industry understand what might be needed in the near future. Let's focus on that. And then let's find a way how it gets done, and how it then, if we build it in the European way, in Europe, we will, by the sheer infrastructure of it, by having it in place, there will be a competitive advantage, because obviously it will be run here, and it will serve the industry that is operating here, not in wherever other country. And then slowly but surely learn from it. This is, I mean, we all learn in our management trainings, agile, step by step, incremental. We are very much in a environment where everything is highly volatile, highly uncertain, and therefore step by step is the best way to do. And right now we are very much in the pathfinding place yet. Yes, let's get together, let's decide what is needed, and let's slowly build it. But at this point, if you go in and throw at the political level, you throw hundreds of billions at it, it might be too early.
And maybe add a bit of a non-economic political perspective. So I mean, I would be super happy if we have German mega platforms like the Googles and the Spotifys. But like, we had this discussion internally. Are we really better off? Like, if we have, whatever, 3 companies that size all in Berlin, or aren't we better off have like 10 decently sized platforms and still 1,000 hidden champions? Because personally, I don't live in Berlin, I don't live in Hamburg, I live in the countryside, and I really much enjoy that it's possible to live there. So there's Daimler in Wörth, and like you can have a decent life in Sindelfingen, in Jena, wherever. So are we actually aiming for the right goal? So the economic guy inside myself says, yes, it would be super cool to have the German super Google, but politically seen, we have to be honest, is that really what we want to have? Because no offense to the US, Silicon Valley is super, but have a look at the Rust Belt, have a look at all the political implications coming up. So are we really aiming for the right goal? And this is not the economist inside me, this is the politician. So sometimes I'm not sure if we're really hunting basically into the right direction.
So my last question to everybody, maybe a short answer as a summary. Time is already through. How do we create and how do we capture value? Maybe that is, you triggered it already from a political standpoint. Maybe we could go through last statement. What would be in decentralized platform? How do we create and how do we capture value? Is there any short? So
for me, one let's say idea which came up also when we looked at our prototype outside is we have to think also in the direction of user perspective. So it's not only the end user. I think it was clear in the example how this really helps the end user. He doesn't have to care about the best prices in parking lots and so on. It's fully automated, and he has a very nice experience. We can also put this on the next level and asking about what would be the best user experience from a business perspective. And also there I see some strong points out of the technologies which we have shown. If we are able to really build up this foundational layer, which would ease the entry of new businesses And not only the big guys like Daimler or Bosch or Siemens, but also small and medium enterprises in order to lower the barrier in order to play in these ecosystems. And this aspect I find very interesting, and this would be also very, let's say, favorable from a German industry ecosystem point of view, which really lives from small, medium enterprises, KMUs, and industries like this one.
Yes, thank you. The next.
I think we are now at the point where we all agree that we know on how to create value with distributed platforms. I think that is what we discussed the whole day. I think the challenge still is we are not 100% sure how to capture the value on company level. And I think that is what it's all about in the next kind of 12, 24 months to bridge this chasm. Now we have all understood there is a social and economic welfare, and there's a big cake, and how to now split it, and therewith how to set up consortia and how to get things going.
Thank you.
I would pick up the idea of like that the Mittelstand is somehow like driving also the German economy, and that is something we have to keep in mind if we capture value. Because right now we had this in our discussion before, like have in mind the big ones and the startups, but where's the Mittelstand? But I think for the Mittelstand, for example, again, this is very important if they have something they can use. So I come again from an infrastructure perspective, then the market can decide what solution is best, and they can simply build upon it. And then we have something where the value is actually also like captured because it can be transferred. If it can't be transferred, then it's gonna stick where it was created. That won't work.
Thanks.
I think we're, as we said before, past the area of POCs or single POCs, each company for themselves. I think we are now on the stage where we like the different strategies of different countries you mentioned before. We have to look how to combine these POCs to get to the next level, to define the next steps together with other companies, and then therefore finding out the right standards we have to work on.
Thank you.
So if you try to answer the question how to unleash or how to create value, and looking at it from a B2B perspective, I believe the easiest answer, make it easier for those who participate to create value. And that is what we should focus on in the next years, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. I think that was a great discussion. Thanks a lot.